Have you ever been in a position where you knew the truth? Where every fiber of your being screamed that something was desperately wrong, but nobody would listen to you? Have you ever stood before powerful people, people who could crush you with a single phone call and told them something they absolutely refused to believe? Well, I have. And what happened next changed not just my life, but exposed a darkness so profound that even now, years later, I still wake up in cold sweats remembering that day. The day I opened a casket in front of one of the wealthiest families in America and proved that their beloved patriarch hadn't died of natural causes at all. My name is Dr. Sarah Mitchell, and I live to tell this story. But let me be clear from the start. This isn't just about wealth or power or even murder. This is about the terrifying realization that sometimes the people we trust most are the ones hiding the deadliest secrets. I want you to imagine standing in a funeral home, surrounded by marble floors and crystal chandeliers, facing a family dressed in designer black, their faces masks of grief that I absolutely knew, were nothing but theater. Picture me, a 42-year-old physician with everything to lose, demanding that they open the casket of their father, their husband, their golden goose. The room was so silent you could hear hearts beating. Mine was pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. My hands were shaking, my voice was cracking, but I stood there anyway because I had seen something. I had discovered something that made my blood run cold. And in that moment, with security guards moving toward me and lawyers whispering threats, I made a choice that would either vindicate me or destroy everything I had spent 20 years building. The matriarch of the family, Victoria Ashford, looked at me with those ice-blue eyes that had intimidated corporate boards and crushed business rivals, and she said in a voice dripping with contempt, "Dr. Mitchell, you have 30 seconds to leave this premises before I have you arrested for disturbing the peace and defaming my late husband's memory." But I didn't move. I couldn't move. Because 6 feet away from me in that ornate mahogany casket lined with silk lay the body of a man who had trusted me, who had confided in me, who had whispered his fears to me in the quiet hours of the night when his family thought he was sleeping. Marcus Ashford had been many things: a ruthless businessman, a demanding employer, a complicated father, but he had also been my patient for 3 years. And in those 3 years, I had come to see past the billionaire facade to the frightened human being underneath. And now he was dead. Dead at 68 years old, allegedly from a heart attack, and his family was rushing to bury him so fast it made my head spin. The funeral had been scheduled for just 4 days after his death. 4 days. For a man of his stature, that was unheard of. Usually, families like the Ashfords would plan elaborate memorial services that took weeks to organize, with guest lists that read like a who's who of global power. But not this time. This time, they wanted him in the ground immediately. And when I had questioned why, I had been met with hostility and deflection. Victoria had told me it was what Marcus would have wanted, a quiet, family affair. But I knew Marcus Ashford, and I knew that was a lie. The man had an ego the size of Manhattan. He would have wanted a spectacle. So there I stood, in my sensible black dress and pearl earrings, looking decidedly out of place among the Gucci and Prada, holding a folder of medical records that I shouldn't have brought, that could get me fired and possibly sued, but that contained evidence I couldn't ignore. My career flashed before my eyes. Harvard Medical School, residency at Johns Hopkins, chief of internal medicine at Presbyterian. 20 years of impeccable reputation, all of it about to go up in flames because I couldn't keep my mouth shut, because I couldn't let them bury the truth along with Marcus Ashford's body. Have you ever had that feeling, that gut-wrenching certainty that transcends logic and evidence, that just knows something is fundamentally wrong? That's what I was experiencing, amplified by the medical anomalies I had documented, by the conversations I had overheard, by the strange behaviors I had witnessed in the weeks leading up to Marcus's death. And now, in this moment of truth, I had to make them listen. I had to make them see what I had seen. The security guards were closer now, their hands reaching for my arms, when I did something I had never done before in my entire professional life. I raised my voice. I shouted, "If you bury him today, you're burying a murder victim, and I have proof." The words echoed through that funeral home like a gunshot, and suddenly everything stopped. The whispers ceased. The movement froze. Every eye in that room turned to me, and I saw it all: shock, anger, fear, and something else. Something I hadn't expected to see on at least 2 faces in that crowd. I saw recognition. Someone else knew. Someone else knew what I knew. And in that instant, I understood that this was bigger, darker, and more dangerous than I had imagined. Let me take you back to where this all began, to a chilly October morning 3 years earlier, when I received a phone call that would change everything. I was in my office at the hospital, reviewing patient charts and drinking my third cup of coffee, when my assistant buzzed me. "Dr. Mitchell, there's a Mr. Ashford online too. He says it's urgent and personal." I almost didn't take the call. I had a full schedule that day, back-to-back appointments, and I was already running behind. But something in my assistant's tone made me pick up. "This is Dr. Mitchell," I said, expecting a standard consultation request. What I got instead was a voice I recognized from television interviews and business magazines. "Dr. Mitchell, my name is Marcus Ashford. I've been told you're the best internist in the city, possibly the country. I need someone I can trust, and I'm willing to pay whatever it takes to secure your services as my personal physician." I sat up straighter in my chair, my mind racing. Marcus Ashford. The Marcus Ashford. Real estate mogul, venture capitalist, the man who had turned a small inheritance into a $10 billion empire. "Mr. Ashford, I'm flattered, but I don't typically take on private patients. My work at the hospital. I'll donate $5 million to your hospital," he interrupted, his voice firm but not unkind. "And I'll pay you an additional retainer of $500,000 annually. All I ask is that you be available when I need you, that you handle my care personally, and that you maintain absolute confidentiality." I should have said no. Looking back now, I wish I had said no. But the truth is, I was intrigued. Not by the money, though I won't pretend that wasn't significant, but by the urgency in his voice. This wasn't a man making a power play. This was a man who was scared. "Mr. Ashford, can you tell me why you're looking for a new physician?" There was a pause, a long one, and then he said something that should have been my first warning. "Because I don't trust the people around me anymore, Dr. Mitchell. And I need someone who works for me, not for my family." 3 days later, I met Marcus Ashford for the first time at his penthouse apartment on 5th Avenue. The place was extraordinary. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, original artwork that belonged in museums, furniture that cost more than most people's houses. But what struck me most wasn't the wealth on display. It was the man himself. In person, Marcus Ashford was smaller than he appeared in photographs, maybe 5'9", with silver hair and sharp green eyes that seemed to catalog everything. He moved with the careful deliberation of someone in chronic pain, though he tried to hide it. "Dr. Mitchell, thank you for coming," he said, shaking my hand with a grip that was firm but trembling slightly. "Please sit. Can I offer you anything? Coffee? Tea?" "I'm fine, thank you," I replied, settling into a chair that probably cost more than my car. "Mr. Ashford, why don't you tell me what's been going on with your health?" And so he did. For the next 2 hours, Marcus Ashford laid out a medical history that was complex and concerning. He had hypertension, well controlled with medication. He had a history of arrhythmia, also managed. He'd had a minor stroke 5 years earlier that had left no lasting damage. But what worried him, what had prompted this desperate search for a new doctor, was a constellation of new symptoms that his previous physician had dismissed as stress and aging. "I'm tired all the time," he told me, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Not just tired, exhausted. Some days I can barely get out of bed. I've lost weight without trying, about 20 pounds in the last 4 months. I have these episodes where my heart races for no reason, where I feel like I can't catch my breath. And the headaches, God, the headaches are unlike anything I've experienced before." I listened carefully, taking notes, asking questions, my medical mind already forming differential diagnoses. "Has your current doctor run any tests?" Marcus's expression darkened. "He's run basic blood work. Everything came back normal," he said. "Told me I needed to reduce my stress, maybe take a vacation. But Dr. Mitchell, I know my body. Something is wrong. Something is very wrong, and nobody is taking me seriously." I could see the frustration in his eyes, the fear he was trying so hard to mask. This was a man used to being in control, used to solving problems with money and influence, suddenly confronting something that couldn't be bought or intimidated into submission: his own failing health. "Mr. Ashford, I'd like to run a comprehensive panel of tests. Blood work, cardiac monitoring, imaging studies, the works. And I'd like to review all of your current medications, including any supplements or over-the-counter drugs you're taking." He nodded eagerly. "Whatever you need. Money is no object." "It's not about money," I said gently. "It's about getting to the bottom of what's happening to you. But I need you to be completely honest with me about everything: your lifestyle, your habits, your family medical history, all of it." "Of course," he agreed. "I'll tell you anything you need to know." But even as he said it, I saw something flicker across his face, a shadow of hesitation that made me wonder what secrets he might be keeping. Over the next few weeks, I put Marcus through every test I could think of: The results were puzzling. His blood work showed some abnormalities, slightly elevated liver enzymes, some markers of inflammation, but nothing that screamed serious illness. His cardiac monitoring revealed occasional arrhythmias, but nothing life-threatening. The MRI of his brain was clear. By all objective measures, Marcus Ashford was a reasonably healthy 65-year-old man with well-managed chronic conditions. But the symptoms persisted and actually worsened. The fatigue became debilitating. The weight loss continued. New symptoms emerged, episodes of confusion, muscle weakness, gastrointestinal distress. I started seeing him twice a week, then 3 times a week, trying to piece together a puzzle that didn't make sense. And that's when I started noticing the family. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt the hostility, felt the resentment radiating off people like heat from asphalt? That's what it was like whenever I encountered Marcus's wife and children. They didn't want me there. They made that abundantly clear from our very first meeting. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon in late November. I had arrived at the penthouse for a scheduled appointment with Marcus, and instead of the usual housekeeper letting me in, the door was opened by a woman who could only be Victoria Ashford. She was stunning in that ageless, polished way that money can buy, somewhere in her early 60s but looking a decade younger, with platinum blonde hair styled in a perfect bob, wearing a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. But her beauty was cold, intimidating, like looking at a beautiful statue carved from ice. "You must be Dr. Mitchell," she said, her tone making it clear that she had already formed her opinion of me, and it wasn't favorable. "I'm Victoria Ashford. I've been wanting to meet the woman my husband has been spending so much time with." There was an insinuation in her words, a suggestion that made my skin crawl. "Mrs. Ashford, I'm your husband's physician. I'm here for his 2 o'clock appointment." "Yes, his appointments," she said, stepping aside to let me enter, but blocking my path just enough to make it uncomfortable. "Marcus mentioned he's been seeing you 3 times a week now. That seems excessive for someone who supposedly just has stress-related symptoms, doesn't it?" I maintained my professional composure, though inside I was bristling. "Your husband has complex medical needs that require close monitoring. I'm simply providing the care he needs." "The care he needs," she repeated, her lips curving into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Or the attention he wants? My husband is a powerful man, Dr. Mitchell, but he's also lonely and vulnerable. I hope you're not taking advantage of that." The accusation was so outrageous, so inappropriate, that for a moment I was speechless. Before I could respond, a male voice cut through the tension. "Mother, that's enough." A man in his late 30s had appeared from one of the rooms, tall and lean with Marcus's green eyes but his mother's cold demeanor. "Dr. Mitchell, I'm Christopher Ashford, Marcus's oldest son. Please excuse my mother. She's been under a great deal of stress." But his apology felt hollow, performative, and his eyes held the same suspicion as his mother's. "I'm just here to see my patient," I said firmly. "Is Mr. Ashford available?" "He's in his study," Christopher said. "But while you're here, perhaps we could have a brief conversation about my father's treatment plan. My sister and I have some concerns." "Any discussions about your father's medical care need to happen with his consent," I replied, already moving past them toward Marcus's study. "I'm sure you understand patient confidentiality." I could feel their eyes boring into my back as I walked away, and I understood in that moment that I had just made enemies of the Ashford family. They saw me as a threat, an outsider who had too much access to Marcus, too much influence. What they didn't realize yet was that they were the ones I should have been afraid of. Marcus was in his study, a room lined with books and mahogany, sitting behind a desk that looked like it belonged in the Oval Office. But he wasn't working. He was slumped in his chair, his face pale and drawn, looking every one of his 65 years and then some. "Marcus," I said, my medical training kicking in immediately, moving to his side and checking his pulse. "What's wrong? When did this start?" "About an hour ago," he said weakly. Sudden onset, felt like the room was spinning. I've been nauseated, weak. "Victoria wanted to call 911, but I told her to wait for you." "Your pulse is rapid," I said, pulling out my stethoscope. "Any chest pain? Shortness of breath?" "No chest pain. Breathing okay. Just feel awful, like I've been poisoned or something." The word poisoned hung in the air between us, and I saw his eyes widen slightly, as if he hadn't meant to say it out loud. "Marcus, that's an interesting word choice. Why would you say poisoned?" He looked away, suddenly fascinated by something on his desk. "Just an expression, I feel terrible, that's all." But the seed was planted, a tiny seed of suspicion that would grow over the coming months into a terrible certainty. I examined him thoroughly, took his vitals, and ultimately decided he needed to be hospitalized for observation. The episode turned out to be a severe bout of vertigo combined with gastric distress, possibly viral, possibly stress-induced. He recovered after 2 days in the hospital, but something had changed. He was more guarded now, more paranoid, and he started saying things that worried me. "Dr. Mitchell, I need you to keep careful records of everything," he told me one evening when I was doing my rounds at the hospital. "Every symptom, every medication, every test result. Document it all." "I always do, Marcus. That's standard medical practice." "No, I mean really document it. Keep copies for yourself. Don't rely on the hospital's electronic system or my home records. Keep your own files. Secure files." I frowned. "Marcus, what are you afraid of?" He looked at me for a long moment, and I could see the internal struggle playing out across his face. Finally, he said, "I think someone in my family is trying to kill me." The words were so absurd, so melodramatic, that my first instinct was to dismiss them as paranoia, possibly a symptom of his illness. But the absolute conviction in his voice made me pause. "That's a very serious accusation," I said carefully. "What makes you think that?" "Because I know my family, Dr. Mitchell. I know what they're capable of. I've made some decisions recently, changes to my will, to the structure of my companies, and they're not happy about it. Victoria especially. And my children, they've been circling like vultures, waiting for me to die so they can inherit. But I'm not ready to die yet, and that's a problem for them." "Marcus, have you considered that these thoughts might be related to your symptoms? Sometimes when people are feeling ill, they can become suspicious, even paranoid." "I'm not paranoid," he snapped, more forcefully than I'd ever heard him speak. "I'm realistic. You don't build an empire like mine without making enemies, even within your own family, especially within your own family." I didn't know what to say. This was beyond my expertise, beyond the realm of medicine, and into something darker, more sinister. "If you truly believe you're in danger, you should contact the authorities," I suggested. "No," he said immediately. "No police, no authorities. I have no proof, just instincts. And besides, the Ashford name can't afford that kind of scandal. I just need you to be watchful. Notice things, document things. Can you do that for me?" I hesitated, torn between professional ethics and personal concern for my patient. "I'll document your medical care thoroughly," I said finally. "That's what I can promise you." He seemed to accept that, settling back against his pillows with a sigh. "That's all I ask. Just pay attention, Dr. Mitchell. Pay attention to everything." And so I did. I started paying attention in ways I never had before, not just to Marcus's symptoms and vital signs, but to the dynamics of his family, to who was around when his episodes occurred, to patterns and coincidences that might not be coincidences at all. What I saw disturbed me deeply. Over the following months, I documented everything with obsessive detail. Every time Marcus had an episode, I noted who had been in the apartment, what he had eaten, what medications he had taken, what activities he had engaged in. And slowly, terrifyingly, a pattern began to emerge. Marcus's symptoms were always worse after family dinners. Not immediately after, but within 12 to 24 hours following any meal where the entire Ashford clan had gathered. At first, I told myself it was stress. Family dynamics were clearly toxic, and stress could absolutely manifest in physical symptoms. But the correlation was too consistent, too predictable. After Thanksgiving dinner, Marcus ended up in the emergency room with severe abdominal cramping and vomiting. After his birthday celebration in January, he experienced 3 days of debilitating headaches and confusion. After a family brunch in February, his heart went into an irregular rhythm that required cardioversion. I started running additional tests, screening for things that wouldn't normally be on a routine panel: heavy metals, toxicology screens, looking for anything, any substance that might explain his symptoms. The results were always inconclusive, showing trace amounts of various compounds that could be explained by environmental exposure, dietary intake, normal metabolic processes. Nothing definitive, nothing I could point to as proof. But my instincts, those same instincts that had made me a good doctor, were screaming that something was terribly wrong. I tried to talk to Marcus about avoiding family gatherings, about limiting his exposure to situations that seemed to precede his episodes. But he refused. "If I start avoiding my own family, they'll know I suspect something," he explained. "I need to maintain appearances while I figure out what to do." "What you need to do is protect yourself," I argued. "Your health is deteriorating, Marcus. Whatever is happening, it's getting worse." "I know," he said quietly. "I can feel it." I'm dying, Dr. Mitchell. Slowly, but surely, I'm dying. And I don't think it's natural causes. The conversation haunted me. Here was a man, one of the most powerful men in America, convinced he was being murdered by his own family. And I couldn't prove him wrong. I couldn't prove him right either, but I couldn't prove him wrong. I started keeping the detailed records Marcus had asked for, storing them in an encrypted file on a personal hard drive that I kept in a safe deposit box. Every symptom, every test result, every observation about family dynamics and timing of episodes. I documented conversations I overheard, fragments of arguments between Marcus and Victoria about money, about his will, about business decisions. I noted how his children visited more frequently as his health declined, but their visits seemed performative, obligatory, more concerned with his financial affairs than his well-being. Christopher, the eldest son, was always pushing Marcus to sign documents, to make business decisions, to update various legal instruments. "Father, you need to think about the future of the company," I heard him say one day when I arrived early for an appointment. "The board is getting nervous. They need to know there's a succession plan in place." "The succession plan is that I'm not dying anytime soon," Marcus shot back, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "And when I do die, the company goes where I decide it goes, not where you think it should go." Elena, the daughter, was more subtle in her approach, but no less mercenary. She played the doting daughter, bringing flowers and expensive gifts, staying for tea and conversation. But I watched her eyes, saw how they flickered to Marcus's desk, to his phone, to any document left out in the open. She was gathering information, I realized. Surveillance disguised as filial affection. And then there was Victoria, Marcus's wife of 37 years, the woman who had been by his side as he built his empire, who had raised his children and hosted his business dinners and presented the perfect image of a society matriarch. She was the most dangerous of all, I came to believe, because she was the most calculating. I would catch her watching Marcus with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between hatred and impatience, as if he were an obstacle that should have been removed by now. One evening in late March, I witnessed a confrontation that confirmed my worst fears. I had arrived at the penthouse for an emergency call. Marcus was experiencing severe chest pains, and I found Victoria and Christopher in heated discussion in the hallway outside Marcus's bedroom. They didn't see me at first, and I heard Christopher say, "Mother, it's taking too long. He's suspicious, he's changing things, we're running out of time." "Keep your voice down," Victoria hissed, "and be patient. These things can't be rushed without raising questions." "Questions from who? That doctor? She doesn't know anything. She can't prove anything. She's too involved, too observant. We need to be careful around her." I cleared my throat loudly, and they both spun around, their faces transforming instantly from conspiratorial anger to polite concern. "Dr. Mitchell," Victoria said smoothly, "thank goodness you're here. Marcus is in terrible pain. We've been so worried." I pushed past them without a word, my heart racing, my mind replaying what I had just heard. They were discussing Marcus as if he were a problem to be solved, an inconvenience to be dealt with, and they had mentioned me, acknowledged that I was a potential obstacle. I was now part of whatever dark game they were playing, whether I wanted to be or not. Marcus was in bed, clutching his chest, his face contorted in pain. I immediately went into emergency mode, checking his vitals, administering medication, calling for an ambulance. This time, the chest pain was real and serious. He was having a heart attack. In the ambulance, as we rushed to the hospital, Marcus grabbed my hand with surprising strength. "Sarah," he said, using my first name for the first time ever, "promise me something. When I die, and I will die, they're going to make sure of it. Promise me you won't let them get away with it. Promise me you'll find the truth." "Don't talk like that," I said, fighting back tears. "You're going to be fine. We're going to get you through this. Promise me," he insisted, his grip tightening. "Please." "I promise," I whispered. "I promise I'll find the truth." He smiled weakly and closed his eyes. "Thank you. I knew I could trust you. In my desk, bottom drawer, there's a key. It opens a safe deposit box at First National Bank. Box number 473. Everything you need is there. Marcus, just remember, 473. The truth is in there." By the time we reached the hospital, Marcus had stabilized. The heart attack was mild, caught early enough that the damage was minimal. He would recover, the cardiologist assured me. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my core, that this was just the beginning. They had tried to kill him, perhaps not directly, but through whatever poison they had been administering, and they would try again. I started spending more time at the penthouse, inserting myself into situations where I wouldn't normally be present. I claimed I needed to monitor Marcus more closely, which was true, but I was also watching Victoria carefully measure out his medications, watching Christopher bring special health drinks he claimed were recommended by some celebrity nutritionist, watching Elena insist on preparing Marcus's favorite meals herself, meals that invariably left him sick within hours. Have you ever been in a position where you know something terrible is happening, but you're completely powerless to stop it? Where you can see the threat, understand the danger, but have no way to protect someone you care about? That's where I found myself. I became obsessed with finding proof, something concrete that would expose what the Ashford family was doing to Marcus. I spent my evenings researching poisons that could mimic natural illness, substances that would be difficult to detect in standard toxicology screens. I learned about heavy metal poisoning, about plant-based toxins, about pharmaceutical combinations that could slowly destroy someone's health while leaving minimal forensic evidence. The list was disturbingly long. Arsenic administered in small doses could cause the fatigue, gastrointestinal symptoms, and confusion that Marcus experienced. Digitalis, derived from foxglove, could cause the cardiac arrhythmias, while being difficult to distinguish from therapeutic levels if someone was already on heart medications. Even something as simple as excessive doses of his own prescribed medications, carefully increased over time, could create a cascade of health problems that would look like natural deterioration. I started intercepting Marcus's medications whenever possible, sending samples to independent laboratories for analysis. The results were frustrating, inconclusive. Everything appeared normal, within expected ranges. But I knew in my bones, that something was wrong. The pattern was too clear, the timing too consistent. Then in April, something happened that gave me the breakthrough I had been desperately seeking. Marcus asked me to come to the penthouse late one evening, unusual because he typically preferred afternoon appointments. When I arrived, he was alone in his study, and he looked more alert, more focused than I had seen him in months. I had the locks changed today, he told me before I could even ask why he had called. The entire apartment, new locks, new security codes. Victoria is furious, but I don't care anymore. I needed to do something to protect myself. That's good, I said, relieved that he was finally taking concrete steps. What prompted this? This, he said, sliding a small vial across his desk toward me. I found it hidden in Victoria's bathroom cabinet, tucked behind some face creams and lotions. Do you know what it is? I picked up the vial carefully, examining it. It was unmarked, containing a clear liquid that looked like water. No, but I can have it analyzed. I already know what it is, Marcus said, his voice tight with suppressed rage. It's liquid nicotine, concentrated. I looked it up. In small doses, it causes nausea, dizziness, rapid heartbeat, all the symptoms I've been experiencing. In larger doses, it causes seizures, respiratory failure, death, and it's nearly impossible to detect post-mortem unless you're specifically looking for it. My blood ran cold. Marcus, this is evidence. We need to go to the police right now. This is attempted murder. Is it, though? He asked bitterly. A vial of liquid in my wife's bathroom? She could claim it's for anything, some alternative health remedy, something she bought from some wellness guru. Without proof that she administered it to me, without documented evidence of nicotine in my system at levels that can't be explained by environmental exposure, it's just a suspicion. My word against hers. Then we'll document it. We'll run the tests. We'll prove— Sarah, listen to me, he interrupted, leaning forward with an intensity that was almost frightening. I don't have time for a lengthy investigation. My health is failing too quickly. They've been poisoning me for months, maybe longer, and the damage is cumulative. Even if we stop it now, I don't know if I'll recover. Tears stung my eyes. Don't say that. We can get you into protective custody. I'm not going to spend my last days in some hospital room or safe house hiding from my own family, he said firmly. I've made my decision. I've changed my will, left everything to charitable trusts and foundations. Victoria and the children get nothing except what's legally required. It's already filed, already notarized, already irrevocable. They don't know yet, but they will soon. Marcus, if you cut them off, if they find out about the will change, you're putting yourself in even more danger. They'll escalate. Let them, he said with a grim smile, because that's when they'll make a mistake. That's when they'll get sloppy, and that's when you'll be able to prove what they've done. What are you saying? I'm saying I need you to be my witness, Sarah. When I die, and I will die soon, I need you to make sure the truth comes out. I need you to make sure they don't get away with this. I can't just let you die, I protested, my voice breaking. I'm your doctor. My job is to keep you alive. Your job is to respect my autonomy and my choices, he said gently. I'm not asking you to assist in anything. I'm just asking you to document what happens. Watch them. Gather evidence. And when the time comes, speak the truth about what you know. The ethical implications of what he was asking were staggering. He was essentially using himself as bait, allowing his family to continue their attempts on his life so that I could gather evidence. It went against everything I believed in as a physician, everything I had sworn to uphold. I can't do this, I whispered. I can't just watch you die. Then don't watch me die. Watch them kill me. There's a difference. He pulled out a document from his desk, a notarized statement. I've written everything down. My suspicions, the timeline of my symptoms, the correlation with family events, the vial I found. It's all here. I'm giving you a copy, and my lawyer has another. When I die, this becomes part of the investigation, if you can convince anyone to investigate. I took the document with shaking hands, knowing that I was crossing a line I could never uncross. I was becoming part of a trap, a witness to a murder that hadn't happened yet, but that we both knew was inevitable. Over the next few weeks, I watched Marcus deteriorate rapidly. The will reading had taken place, and the family had learned that they were being disinherited. The reaction was exactly what Marcus had predicted. Victoria moved out of the penthouse, taking up residence in their Hampton estate. Christopher and Elena barely concealed their fury, confronting their father in screaming matches that left him pale and shaking. The family dinner stopped, but that didn't mean the attempts on his life ceased. If anything, they became more brazen, more desperate. I found myself constantly at the penthouse, monitoring Marcus, trying to control everything he ate and drank. But I couldn't be there 24 hours a day. And there were gaps, opportunities for someone to get to him. The end came on a humid evening in late June. I received a frantic call from Marcus's housekeeper at 11:30 p.m. Doctor, Mitchell, you need to come right away. Mr. Ashford, he's collapsed. He's not breathing right. I've called 911, but you're closer. I grabbed my medical bag and raced to the penthouse, breaking every traffic law in Manhattan. When I arrived, the apartment was chaos. EMTs were working on Marcus, who was lying on the floor of his bedroom, his face blue, his body convulsing. The housekeeper was crying in the corner. And standing in the doorway, dry-eyed and composed, was Victoria. What happened? I demanded, pushing past her to get to Marcus. I don't know, Victoria said coolly. I came to pick up some of my things. The housekeeper called me, said Marcus wanted to speak with me. When I arrived, he was already like this. I didn't believe her for a second. The housekeeper had said she called me first, which meant Victoria had been here when Marcus collapsed, possibly before. I knelt beside the EMTs, assessing the situation. Signs of acute poisoning, the lead paramedic was saying. Possible cardiac arrest. We need to transport immediately. I'm his personal physician, I said. I'm coming with you. In the ambulance, I held Marcus's hand as the paramedics worked frantically to stabilize him. His eyes fluttered open briefly, and he looked at me with such sadness, such resignation, that I knew he was saying goodbye. Don't let them, he whispered so quietly I almost missed it. Don't let them win. I won't, I promised. I won't let them win. He died 17 minutes later in the emergency room. Despite every intervention, every medication, every desperate attempt to restart his heart, Marcus Ashford was pronounced dead at 12:47 a.m. Cause of death, pending autopsy, was listed as cardiac arrest, likely related to his pre-existing heart condition. I stood in that sterile hospital room, looking at his body, and I felt a rage unlike anything I had ever experienced. This wasn't a natural death. This was murder, premeditated and calculated. And I had watched it happen. I had documented it, witnessed it, and now I had to make sure it meant something. The next morning, I requested a complete autopsy with extended toxicology screening. The hospital administrator looked at me with confusion. Dr. Mitchell, the family has requested minimal intervention. Mrs. Ashford was very clear that she wants her husband's body released as quickly as possible for funeral arrangements. I'm requesting it as his physician of record, I said firmly. There are unexplained aspects of his death that warrant investigation. The family has the right to refuse an extensive autopsy, the administrator pointed out. And quite frankly, for a man with his cardiac history, the cause of death seems straightforward. It's not straightforward, I insisted. Please, just run the extended screening. I have reason to believe. Be very careful about what you're suggesting, Dr. Mitchell, he interrupted, his tone turning cold. The Ashford family is extremely powerful and extremely litigious. If you're implying something irregular about Mr. Ashford's death without solid evidence, You could be opening yourself and this hospital up to serious legal consequences. I left his office knowing that I was on my own. The hospital wouldn't support me. The administration was too afraid of the Ashford lawyers, too protective of the substantial donations the family had made over the years. But I wasn't going to let it go. I contacted the medical examiner's office directly, requesting a meeting. I brought my documentation, my records, Marcus's notarized statement. I laid it all out for a weary detective named Martinez, who looked at me like I was either crazy or naive. Dr. Mitchell, what you're describing is certainly suspicious, he said after reviewing everything. But without a clear toxicology report showing lethal levels of poison, without witnesses to the actual administration of any substance, what we have is circumstantial. A wealthy man with health problems died of a heart attack. That's what it looks like on paper. Then look beyond the paper, I pleaded. Order the specialized tests. Check for nicotine poisoning, check for digitalis, check for anything that could have been used to gradually poison him over months. I'll see what I can do, Martinez said, but I could tell he was humoring me. The problem is, the family is pushing for immediate release of the body. The funeral is scheduled for 4 days from now. Once he's embalmed, it becomes much harder to run accurate toxicology screens. 4 days, I repeated, my heart sinking. They're trying to bury the evidence. Or they're a grieving family who wants to lay their husband and father to rest, Martinez countered. Look, I understand you were close to Mr. Ashford. Sometimes when we lose a patient, especially under sudden circumstances, we look for explanations, for someone to blame. But that doesn't always mean there was foul play. I wanted to scream at him, to shake him, to make him understand that this wasn't grief talking. This was knowledge. This was certainty. But I controlled myself, thanked him for his time, and left with my documentation clutched in my hands. The next 3 days were a nightmare of bureaucracy and stonewalling. The medical examiner's office claimed they needed family permission for extensive testing. The family refused, claiming it was unnecessary and disrespectful to Marcus's memory. My requests were denied at every turn. I even tried going public, reaching out to journalists who covered financial crimes, suggesting there might be a story about the suspicious death of a billionaire. But without proof, without official investigation, no one was willing to run with it. The Ashford family's lawyers sent me a cease and desist letter, warning me against making defamatory statements about their clients. On the morning of the funeral, I woke up knowing that I had one last chance to expose the truth, one last opportunity to honor the promise I had made to Marcus. And I was going to take it, regardless of the consequences. I arrived at the funeral home 2 hours before the service was scheduled to begin, wearing my most professional attire, carrying my medical bag and the folder of documentation that had become my constant companion. The funeral director, a smooth-talking man named Peterson, greeted me with practiced sympathy. Dr. Mitchell, we weren't expecting you so early. The family hasn't arrived yet. The viewing doesn't begin for another hour. I need to see Mr. Ashford, I said. As his physician, I have some concerns that I need to address before the service. Peterson's expression shifted from sympathetic to wary. I'm not sure I understand. The preparations are complete. The casket is closed as per the family's wishes. I need you to open it. I can't do that without the family's permission. Then I'll wait until they arrive and request it then. I settled into one of the funeral home's uncomfortable chairs, prepared to wait as long as necessary. When the Ashford family began arriving, Victoria first with Christopher and Elena flanking her like bodyguards, I stood up and approached them. Mrs. Ashford, I need to speak with you about something important. Victoria looked at me with barely concealed contempt. Dr. Mitchell, this is neither the time nor the place. I would ask you to respect our grief and leave. I'll leave after you open the casket. The room, which had been filled with the low murmur of arriving mourners, went silent. Every eye turned to us. Victoria's face remained perfectly composed, but I saw her jaw tighten, saw the flash of something dangerous in her eyes. That's absolutely out of the question. How dare you make such a request at my husband's funeral? I dare because I made a promise to Marcus, I said, raising my voice so everyone in the room could hear. I promised him that I wouldn't let his death go uninvestigated. I promised him that I would find the truth. Christopher stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. This is harassment, Dr. Mitchell. You've been making wild accusations about our family for weeks, spreading vicious rumors, and now you're disrupting our father's funeral. Leave immediately, or I will have you removed and arrested for trespassing. Arrest me then, I said, standing my ground. But first, let me tell everyone here what I know. Let me tell them about the progressive poisoning I documented over the last 6 months. Let me tell them about the vial of concentrated nicotine I found. Let me tell them about the will change that left this family with nothing giving them perfect motive for murder. The gasps that rippled through the room were audible. Guests who had come to pay their respects were now witnessing what was essentially an accusation of murder at a funeral. It was sensational, inappropriate, and possibly career-ending for me, but I didn't care anymore. Victoria's composure finally cracked. You have no proof of anything. You're a disgraced doctor with an unhealthy attachment to your patient, making desperate accusations to avoid accepting his natural death. Marcus died of a heart attack, clearly documented by the emergency room physicians. Then you should have no problem with an independent examination of his body, I countered. If everything was natural, if my suspicions are baseless, an examination will prove that and clear your name. But if you refuse, if you rush to bury him without proper investigation, what does that tell everyone here? What are you so afraid we'll find? Elena spoke up for the first time, her voice shaking with what might have been genuine emotion or excellent acting. Our father was sick, Dr. Mitchell. You treated him for months. You know he had heart problems. You know he had multiple health issues. Why is it so hard for you to accept that he simply died from his existing conditions? Because the timing and progression of his symptoms don't match natural disease progression, I said, opening my folder and pulling out charts and graphs I had prepared. Because every major episode corresponded with family gatherings or visits. Because he found evidence of poison in this very household. Because he told me, explicitly told me, that he believed his family was trying to kill him. The room erupted in chaos. People were shouting, guests were backing away from the Ashford family, the funeral director was trying to restore order, and security guards were approaching me from both sides. But I wasn't finished. I turned to the crowd, many of whom were business associates, people who had known Marcus for decades. Marcus Ashford changed his will 3 months ago. He left his entire estate to charitable foundations, cutting his family out almost completely. They discovered this 6 weeks before his death. 2 weeks later, his health took a dramatic turn for the worse. He died under suspicious circumstances, and his family is trying to bury him in 4 days, preventing any thorough investigation. I'm asking you, as people who knew him, who respected him, is this what Marcus would have wanted? Would he want his death to go unexamined? Would he want his potential murderers to walk free? That's enough. Victoria's voice cut through the din like a knife. You want to open the casket? Fine. We'll open it. Let everyone see there's nothing unusual. Nothing that supports your delusional theories. Mr. Peterson, open the casket immediately. The funeral director looked horrified. Mrs. Ashford, I really don't think— Open it, she commanded. Let's end this circus once and for all. As Peterson moved toward the casket with obvious reluctance, I felt my heart racing. This was it. This was the moment of truth. If I was wrong, if my suspicions were unfounded, my career was over, my reputation destroyed. But if I was right, if there was evidence of foul play visible even to the untrained eye, then justice for Marcus might actually be possible. Peterson slowly opened the lid of the casket, and there lay Marcus Ashford, dressed in his finest suit, hands crossed over his chest, looking peaceful and dignified. Victoria gestured toward the open casket with theatrical contempt. There. Are you satisfied, Dr. Mitchell? Do you see any signs of your imaginary poison? Any evidence of foul play? But I was already moving forward, my medical training taking over. I leaned in close, examining Marcus's face, his hands, looking for the signs I knew should be there if my theory was correct. And then I saw it. The subtle discoloration around his lips, a faint bluish tint that hadn't been there in the emergency room, the unusual rigidity in his fingers beyond normal rigor mortis, the tiny petechiae, small burst blood vessels, visible on his eyelids when I gently lifted them. Look, I said, pulling out my phone to document what I was seeing. Look at the cyanosis around his mouth. Look at the petechiae. These are classic signs of acute poisoning, specifically consistent with nicotine toxicity. This isn't what natural cardiac arrest looks like. A woman in the crowd, another physician I recognized from medical conferences, stepped forward to look. She's right, the woman said slowly. Those are unusual presentations for standard cardiac death. Dr. N.A. Mitchell, what exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that someone administered a lethal dose of poison to Marcus Ashford shortly before his death, and that the evidence is literally right in front of us. I'm suggesting that we need to halt this funeral immediately and demand a complete forensic autopsy before any embalming or burial can occur. Victoria's face had gone pale. This is absurd. You're manufacturing evidence, seeing what you want to see. Guards, remove Dr. Mitchell from the premises immediately. But the guards hesitated. Too many people had seen what I had pointed out. Too many questions were being raised. And then Detective Martinez, who I had met with earlier in the week, pushed through the crowd. I hadn't seen him arrive, hadn't known he was there. "Mrs. Ashford," he said, showing his badge, "I'm going to have to ask you and your family to remain here. Dr. Mitchell's allegations are serious enough to warrant investigation. No one is leaving until we get some answers." I could have cried with relief. Someone was finally listening, finally taking this seriously. Martinez turned to me. "Dr. Mitchell, I'm going to need all your documentation, everything you've compiled on Mr. Ashford's case, and I'm ordering an immediate forensic autopsy with comprehensive toxicology screening." Victoria found her voice again, cold and controlled despite the circumstances. "This is harassment. We'll be filing complaints, lawsuits, whatever it takes to stop this witch hunt." "File whatever you want, ma'am," Martinez said calmly. "But right now, you and your family are persons of interest in a potential homicide investigation. I suggest you contact your lawyers." The funeral home had become a crime scene. Guests were being questioned, the casket was being secured as evidence, and the Ashford family was being separated for individual interviews. I stood to the side, watching it all unfold, feeling a mixture of triumph and exhaustion. I had done it. I had kept my promise to Marcus. I had made sure the truth wouldn't be buried with him. The forensic autopsy took 3 days. 3 days of waiting, of second-guessing myself, of wondering if I had just destroyed my career over an elaborate but ultimately incorrect theory. But when the results came back, they vindicated everything I had suspected, everything Marcus had believed. The toxicology report revealed lethal levels of nicotine in Marcus's system, far beyond what could be explained by any environmental exposure or accidental ingestion. But it wasn't just nicotine. The forensic pathologist found a cocktail of substances, small doses of digitalis that had accumulated in his system, traces of arsenic that had been administered over months, possibly years, and evidence of deliberate overdoses of his own cardiac medications. Marcus hadn't died of natural causes. He had been systematically poisoned over an extended period, his death carefully orchestrated to look like the inevitable result of his pre-existing conditions. It was sophisticated, calculated, and almost perfect. Almost. Detective Martinez called me to his office to review the findings. "Dr. Mitchell, I owe you an apology," he said, sliding the autopsy report across his desk. "You were right about everything. Marcus Ashford was murdered, and you're the only reason we know about it." "Do you have enough to make arrests?" I asked. "We're building the case now. We've obtained search warrants for the Ashford properties, and we've found evidence, significant evidence. Vials of poison hidden in various locations, internet searches on Victoria's computer for untraceable toxins, financial records showing that the family was in serious debt despite their apparent wealth. They needed Marcus's money desperately, and when he changed his will, they panicked. What happens now? Now we do what should have been done from the beginning. We investigate thoroughly, we build an airtight case, and we make sure that justice is served for Marcus Ashford." The arrests came 2 weeks later. Victoria Ashford, Christopher Ashford, and Elena Ashford were all charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and fraud. The trial was sensational, making headlines for months. The prosecution presented my documentation as key evidence, showing the pattern of poisoning, the correlation between family interactions and Marcus's symptoms, the deliberate attempts to prevent investigation of his death. The defense tried to paint me as an obsessed doctor with an inappropriate attachment to her patient, someone who had manufactured evidence and jumped to conclusions. But the forensic evidence was too strong, the pattern too clear. In the end, all 3 were convicted. Victoria received life without parole. Christopher and Elena received sentences of 40 years to life. The Ashford empire, already in shambles from the revelation of their financial troubles and the terms of Marcus's will, was liquidated, with the proceeds going to the charitable foundations Marcus had established. Standing outside the courthouse after the verdict was read, I felt a profound sense of completion. Marcus's trust in me had been vindicated. His final wishes had been honored. The people who had betrayed him, who had slowly murdered him for money they would never see, were facing justice. But victory felt hollow in many ways. I had lost a patient, someone who had become more than just a case file to me. I had seen the absolute worst of what human beings were capable of doing to their own family. And I had learned that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who share your last name, who sit across from you at dinner, who kiss you goodnight while planning your death. The media called me a hero, the doctor who wouldn't give up, who fought against a powerful family to expose the truth. But I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like someone who had witnessed something terrible and simply refused to look away. Someone who had made a promise and kept it, regardless of the cost. My career survived, though it was fundamentally changed. I left private practice and returned full-time to the hospital, where I could focus on patients who needed care without the complications of wealth and family politics. But I never forgot Marcus Ashford, and I never forgot the lesson his death taught me about vigilance, about trusting your instincts, about the importance of documentation and persistence when something feels wrong. Have you ever made a promise that changed your entire life? Have you ever stood up against people more powerful than you, knowing it might cost you everything, but doing it anyway because it was right? I have, and I would do it again. I live to tell this story because Marcus Ashford trusted me with his truth, even knowing he wouldn't live to see justice. He turned his death into testimony, his final act a trap for the people who thought they could kill him and walk away unpunished. Every time I see a patient now, especially an elderly patient with vague symptoms and complicated family dynamics, I pay attention in ways I never did before. I document everything. I ask questions that might seem intrusive. I trust my instincts when something feels off, because I learned that sometimes the difference between murder and natural death is nothing more than a doctor who's willing to look closely enough to see the truth. If you're watching this video, if you've stayed with me through this entire story, I want you to take something away from it. Pay attention to the people in your life, especially your elderly relatives and friends. If someone you love starts showing unexplained symptoms, if their health declines in ways that don't quite make sense, if there are people around them who seem more interested in their assets than their well-being, ask questions. Insist on thorough medical evaluation. Don't accept easy explanations when the situation feels complicated. Trust your gut when something seems wrong, even if you can't immediately prove why. Marcus Ashford died because his family saw him as nothing more than an obstacle to wealth they believed was rightfully theirs. But he didn't die in vain, because his death exposed a truth that has probably saved other lives, made other families think twice before acting on their darkest impulses, and reminded the medical community that we can never stop being advocates for our patients, even after they're gone. I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever suspected something was wrong with a loved one's medical care? Have you ever had to stand up against powerful people to protect someone vulnerable? Have you experienced the kind of family betrayal that Marcus Ashford endured? Share your stories because these conversations matter, because awareness can save lives. And if this story moved you, if it made you think differently about vigilance and advocacy and the importance of trusting your instincts, please leave a like on this video. It helps other people find this story, helps spread awareness about elder abuse and the subtle forms that murder can take when disguised as natural death. Subscribe to I Live to Tell for more true stories about survival, justice, and the extraordinary things ordinary people do when faced with impossible situations. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story, because every week we bring you real experiences from real people who lived through situations most of us can't imagine. Understanding this content isn't just about entertainment, it's about education, about learning to recognize warning signs, about understanding that sometimes the most dangerous situations develop slowly, quietly, in ways that seem normal until you know what to look for. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring enough to listen to Marcus's story and my story. And thank you for being part of a community that believes in truth, justice, and the power of one person refusing to stay silent. I'm Dr. Sarah Mitchell, and I live to tell the truth about Marcus Ashford's murder because someone had to, because he trusted me to, and because some promises are worth keeping no matter what they cost. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember that sometimes the people who seem fine are the ones who need help the most.